Hi. With the recent riots in Tibet, I'd like to say a couple of words regarding this. As you see, there are millions of people who have watched this video. It's called Tibet Was, Is, and Always Will Be Part of China. And I'd like to give you a better explanation of this video. Well, let's start with the history part of this video. There are 56 ethnicities in China, including the Tibetans. In the history records of China, Tibet has been a part of China since the Yuan dynasty. The Yuan dynasty originated from the Mongolian Empire, which broke apart in several large chunks when the Genghis Khan died. Some may argue the Yuan dynasty was a Mongolian dynasty instead of a Chinese dynasty. But over time, the government was heavily influenced by the Chinese culture, and they were well melted into the Chinese society. After the Yuan dynasty came the Ming dynasty. The Ming dynasty inherited the rights to Tibet. However, Ming dynasty was a less militaristic dynasty. They gave more freedom to the localized government, and Tibet was more of a self-governing state, but they had to contribute to the capital every year, which means that they were a part of China. After the Ming dynasty, it was the Qing dynasty. The Manchurians conquered China, and similar to the Ming dynasty, they set up a local government in Tibet, which contributed taxes to the capital every year. Compared to the Yuan dynasty, the Qing dynasty was also established because of the invasion of a minority ethnicity. But who can argue that Qing dynasty was not a Chinese dynasty? Because the Manchurians quickly adapted into the Chinese culture. After the Qing dynasty, the Republic of China was established. And during that time, local warlords controlled parts of China due to the weakness of the central government. Tibet was one of the provinces in China where warlords had complete control over Tibet, and the government could not do much about it because there were wars being fought everywhere in China. Tibet during that time was a very primitive place. A feudal social system was put in place where massive portion of the population were serfs and slaves. They were being sold and traded like goods, and their masters had control of their lives as they wished. The slaves were treated brutally, and you can find lots of pictures and evidences of artifacts made in Tibet during that period of time that showed evidence of torture. Examples are the human skull drums made of human skin from the slaves. And there is a documentary on YouTube that recorded a German expedition into Tibet during the 30s. They commented that it was similar to the Middle Ages. Typical lifespan was 35 years, and infant mortality rate was a whopping 43%. By 1949, World War II was over, and the PLA defeated the Republic of China troops, and Tibet was one of the last places the PLA needed to liberate from warlordship. At that time, the Dalai Lama was a mere teenager. He was a puppet, and it was the warlords who actually controlled Tibet behind the scenes. The Tibetan warlords put up a hopeless fight, and they were defeated soon. The Chinese forces went into Tibet in 1951 and abolished their slavery system. And in 1951, the Dalai Lama went to Beijing to meet Mao Zedong for a peaceful treaty to unify Tibet and China once again. However, during the time when Tibet was controlled by warlords, the aristocrats enjoyed luxury and owned hundreds of slaves. And the Dalai Lama was no exception. And they were sure not willing to give up that luxury. For 8 years, they were secretly funded and trained by CIA, and in 1959, they launched a revolt. The revolt proved to be very deadly because they killed lots of government officials in Tibet at that time, and the PLA forces, they had to intervene, and which caused lots of Tibetan deaths at that time. By the time the revolt was crushed, they smuggled Dalai Lama over to India, which was also part of CIA's doing. In reality, the term Free Tibet has really become a meaningless slogan because Tibet is free. People can do as they wish in Tibet, same as anywhere else in China. Dalai Lama left China in 1959 when he was a teenager, and he has never been back to Tibet, and he does not know the development in Tibet over the years. CIA funded him ever since, and he would say whatever the West needs him to say to earn his check. He's a mere celebrity similar to those in Hollywood. To all the ethnic Tibetan protesters in Europe and America, I ask you how many of them actually been to Tibet, and what do they really know of the world in Tibet? Is it really fair for them to cry out Free Tibet when they have not seen it for themselves? How are the Tibetans being suppressed? I mean, they are most praised in the Chinese culture in reality. Everyone in China knows the Tibetans are great singers and have great voices because of their high altitude environment. The Chinese embrace Tibetan culture, and every New Year's festival in extravaganza, they would have Tibetan dances and singing shows. The government built a railway to Tibet, which was a huge investment. It opened doors to Tibet to the world and led the Tibetans to be able to explore the world. I mean, in the 1980s, Tibetan students, if they wanted to enroll in a university, they had to walk a month to the next province to be able to get to a city with a railway. Their standard of living have increased dramatically. And from the view of the Western politics, China is a threat because of the economic dominance over the world market. I mean, this is typical Western behaviors to try to break another country apart. Hence the term divide and conquer. I mean, typical examples are Soviet Union into now many Soviet republics, and Yugoslavia into Serbia, Bosnia, Kosovo, etc. Saudi Arabia into United Arab Emirates, Yemen, Singapore from Malaysia, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. I mean, the smaller the country is, the weaker it is. Well, to conclude this video, please take your common sense and think things over. Read up on some history, clear your misunderstandings. Then think again if you can yell out senselessly Free Tibet again. Thank you very much.